and welcome to the Idea People podcast. I'm Stephanie Graves, the CEO of Leander's Group. Leander's Group is a full-service PR agency focusing on strategic communications, marketing, and outreach. I'm thrilled to have you join us for today's conversation.
Welcome back to the Idea People, where we sit down with change makers who are building a smarter, more just system in housing, infrastructure, and beyond. Our guests today are a dynamic duo rethinking how financial systems can unlock equity where people live. So Wemimo, Abbey, and Samir Goel are the co-founders of Esusu, which is a platform that helps renters build credit and helps property owners reduce evictions. And we're going to talk a lot more about that because I'm sure that is a big oversimplification. But effectively, it's a win-win that's reshaping housing across the country. As I understand it, you're both children of immigrant families, and I would love to hear some of your lived experiences from both of you. But really, those experiences, as I understand it, have really shaped your unique lens on making an impact and the challenges that people face in securing housing when it comes to building credit and the cost of being credit invisible, if you will. But under your leadership, Esusu has become really a leading financial tech company, and as I understand it, a certified unicorn, partnering with affordable and public housing providers nationwide, including here in California, where I first came across you all at a board meeting for La Casa. So without further ado, welcome Wemimo and Samir to the Idea People. So
thanks, Claire. Excited to be here.
Thank you so much. Let's start at the beginning. Can you just explain what Esusu is and does? And if I'm saying it incorrectly, please correct me as well. I know that you have ties to your backgrounds, which would also like to hear about, but let's start with the company, Esusu. Who would like to take that? What inspired you to create it, and what does it do?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Claire, and really appreciate you having us on, and excited to see the growth of the platform. Esusu was inspired by myself and Samir's personal experiences as immigrants and children of immigrants in the United States. For me, I grew up in the slums of Lagos, Nigeria. I lost my dad at the age of 2. I was raised by my mom and 2 sisters. And one thing my mom always believed in was the power of education. She afforded my school fees to one of the finest high schools in Nigeria, despite having less than an high school degree herself. And she always just believed like education was the ultimate salvation to take out of our current situation. So when I had the opportunity to go to a good school, I self-studied for the SATs, passed, and then moved from 80-degree weather in Lagos to negative 22 degrees in Minnesota, which was a character building experience. And during that transition, something important happened. My mom and I did not have a credit score. We walked into one of the biggest banks to borrow money, and we were turned away and had to go borrow from a predatory lender at over 400% interest rate. My mother sold my dad's ring. We borrowed money from church members, and that's how we got started in America. So really inspired by that experience, and Samir, as we should hear shortly, we started Esusu on 3 core premises: where you come from, what you look like, and above all, what you have or your financial identity shouldn't determine where you end up in the wealthiest nation the world has ever seen. And that's sort of the theology of Esusu. And the real problem that we're addressing is simple. The 110 million people that rent in America, they send roughly $1,100 to their landlords every month. If you do that math, that's close to $1.4 trillion that's been sent to owners and operators of real estate. But when we got in this business, less than 10% of that data showed up on their credit score. So what we built was a financial health platform that creates a win-win-win outcome. A win for the housing provider, because when renters pay their rent and it's reported into the credit bureaus, they tend to sort of pay their rent 7 out of 10 times on time. And then if they can afford to pay rent, we've created a marketplace of quality financial products that can help them live their financial best. So today, Esusu's owners and operators have 5 million doors across all 50 states and roughly 12 million people residing in them. So that's the story of Esusu. Our personal experience is essentially, paved the foundation for where we are today. And with that, I'll pass it to Samir to share a little bit about his own journey and then some of the exciting things that we're working on at Esusu.
Thanks a lot, Wemimo, and Claire, thanks again for having us on. Like Wemimo, I have a personal tie to the work that we do here at Esusu, which stems from my family's journey immigrating from New Delhi, India to the United States. And I think like many immigrant families to this great country, we arrived and thought we had made it. And sadly, that's just not the way that the world works. And we were met with a very rude awakening when my father was mugged on one of his first days in the country. We didn't really have much by way of shelter, and that just set the tone for a lot of my early childhood, watching my parents work miracles without a credit score and with limited financial resources, but still doing everything they could possibly do to create that proverbial American dream for us. And the thought I was left with was it shouldn't be so hard for people doing all the right things to get ahead. And so inspired by that and Wemimo's journey, which you just heard, we founded Esusu on that premise that no matter where you come from, the color of your skin or your financial identity, it should never determine where you end up in life. Fortunately, that ethos led to the platform that we built that Wemimo already articulated, but now spans the entire country, reaching about 5 million rental units and 12 million renters. And we plan to continue to build solutions to really help people go on this journey from establishing a financial identity to ultimately wealth creation. And so for us, through our landlords, we're reaching people, we're helping them build their first financial profile through rent reporting. When they fall on tough times, we're supporting them with eviction prevention funds and flexible payment options. And then, when they need that sort of enhancement of their financial literacy and well-being, we have that marketplace that Wemimo was alluding to. Company-wise, we were founded in Harlem, New York. It's been about 10 years, and we're just shy of 200 people at Esusu, and incredibly excited to continue to try to prove that doing well and doing good are not mutually exclusive.
I love doing well and doing good are not mutually exclusive. That has a nice sound to it, and I want to believe. I'm curious about, the early days. I know that, well, we'll start actually before you became a certified company. I heard that you had something like over 300 rejections when you were starting off in terms of getting your initial funding. And it is not dissimilar in my mind, which might be a simplification of the scenario of people looking for rent and getting rejected because they don't have the right credit score. How did you kind of persist? Like, what drove you? Was it that origin story, just the belief that what you were doing could make a difference in people's lives? And even with that going, I feel like there's something that just really got to push you to continue, because that is an extraordinary, I mean, like, that's way beyond my dating app rejection.
Well, thanks a lot, Claire. I think for us, we had 326 investors said no to us when we started Esusu. And there were a whole host of reasons why they didn't think this was a viable idea. So rejection is second nature, but you have to be bigger than your rejections, and you have to be braver than your rejections, and you have to see beyond the limitations of your rejections. So, for myself and Samir, I think what keeps us going and what inspires us is the ultimate vision that we have and the clarion call that we've set forth, which is the fact that where you come from, what you look like, and what you have in your pocket shouldn't determine where you end up in this great country. And we have a lot of resources, and we are living proof that if you work hard and if you put in the work despite the rejections, you can be successful in this country. And above all, we wanted to create a business that could not only serve people in need, but could also make returns, right? So that's some of the things that, has been discounted before, but when you're rejected and when you're knocked down, I think sometimes the default is just to, give up, but we want this to serve as inspiration to many that might be listening to this podcast that, you should have hope because hopelessness is the enemy of progress, right? You should, continue to persevere because a no for now might just be a not now. And you should never give up because we all have this wonderful perpetual assignment, which is to make this country and hopefully the world more perfect.
In thinking about your early days, once you did get funding, did you think about your audience? Like, in what ways did you connect with people who actually needed your help? Was it through partnerships of those who are trying to support folks finding housing? Were you targeting younger folks, or was it more about just the people, the organizations that you were connected with? I'm so curious about that because, homelessness, it cuts across the swath of age and obviously where you come from and what you look like. But I'm curious about how you went after your initial sort of people you were helping.
Thanks, Claire. That's a question that we've spent a lot of time on over the years as well. And so maybe if I take a step back and go down memory lane, Wemimo and I actually started Esusu as more of a savings product. And our original thesis was we could leverage what's called rotational savings or group savings, where people would form groups of family and friends, pool money together, and take turns withdrawing that group pot to make big ticket purchases. It's one of the etiologies of the name Esusu itself. It's a colloquial way of what that practice is called in West Africa and the Caribbean. But the learning from that time was very interesting to your question because we approached it in a very direct to consumer way, right? So we would go to churches, community centers, and organizations that served populations of people that would benefit from a service like what we were trying to do. And, it was incredibly hard, right? Because it's like, hey, Claire, we just met. Can I have your social security number? Can I have your banking info? Do you want to download this app I created, right? And people were just like, I don't know you like that. And so, then we would share our stories the way we just did on this podcast and tell people why we were building this company and this platform. And that started to resonate. And people were like, okay, there's something about your story that resonates with my story, and I want to give you all a shot. And the challenge there was that that's a very unscalable way of building trust, right? So, that's what we tried to do. We very quickly realized that while it worked, it just wasn't venture backable or scalable for us to reach millions of people the way that we had wanted to. And so that shaped our thinking to really focus on one-to-many channels. How do we reach people through institutions and organizations they already have some sort of a relationship with, trusted or otherwise? Because while most people aren't like, I love my landlord, or my landlord is someone I really think looks out for my best interest all the time, there is actually some level of trust because it's a legitimate source of information. You have a contract, you have a relationship, a transaction that happens every month. And so that was one of the pieces that stemmed from that desire to think about how we could reach people at scale. And so that's really how we got started. Then we were sort of like, okay, two things happened. One, we realized that savings wasn't the end all be all. Rather, there was a prerequisite step, which was helping people get a financial identity that was essential before we started pushing people to save more. And then we started thinking about how can we do that at scale as fast as possible. And so that's really where the insight came to make us focus on reaching landlords and through them reaching people at mass. So that way we could build a business model that works, but at the same time overcome that sort of trust factor, right? Of reaching people, connecting with them, getting them to give you a shot, and then seeing the value of the product. And then, through that virtuous cycle, we now have trust with the residents, right? Because they've seen us through the landlord, we implemented services, those services created value, and we didn't charge them for it. And so now there's this sort of mutual relationship where now we can work with them as they progress on their financial lives. And so that's really how we evolved our thinking and sort of got started.
You mentioned the origin of the name Esusu. Can you tell me a little bit, or tell our listeners a little bit about what that principle or philosophy is? And I'm sure it will be obvious in that description as to why you chose the name.
Yeah, the origin of Esusu is really from West Africa, the Yoruba culture, and sort of this African tradition that is rooted in collectivism. So the whole meaning of Esusu is if you want to go fast, you can go alone, but if you want to go far, we fundamentally need to go together. So that's the ethos, and that's how myself and Samir operate. We run the company as co-CEOs because, doing a hard job like this alone is incredibly hard. But when you share the burden of leadership, it helps essentially provide that frame of mind and a more balanced structure, because I might see something a particular way and Samir might see it a different way, and reach a middle ground that is more tenable for the company. And that's how we run our company. Our values is rooted in collectivism, and we really believe in the concept of going forward together. So that's how the name came about. It's rooted in the African term that if you want to go fast, you go alone, and if you want to go far, fundamentally need to go together.
Oh, that is I love that. I have a big family. So I have 4 adult daughters, and it's amazing how, as an older adult, I don't think about my credit as often, but they really do think about their credit, and it is a big deal to them. And so I think that there is a growing awareness among young folks, that this is an important accomplishment that they need to strive for. And so I really appreciate the fact that you are supporting those goals, because it's sort of a scary time, let's face it. But in thinking about the developers, the landlords, the property owners, how do you also support them? Because, it is as a collective initiative. There's obviously got to be a win on their end as well. So can you tell me a little bit about how you give and build trust within that sort of business side of your stakeholders?
Absolutely. And Claire, actually, you mentioned it at the very beginning of this podcast, which is you mentioned the phrase win-win. And that is actually at the core of how we operate Esusu and what makes it work, where we can create values for both the renter, the landlord, and society as a whole, right? So the renter value proposition we've covered and is fairly intuitive, right? You pay rent, you build credit, you get access to tools and services to improve your financial well-being. We had to think about the same ROI for landlords. And one of the great things about rent reporting is it also encourages people to pay their rent on time more consistently. And so landlords would actually see an uptick in on-time rental payments, which is really their entire business, right? And then things like eviction prevention or flexible pay options and all those other things also serve to make sure that landlords get paid and they get paid on time. And what's so interesting is often real estate is sort of structured as this win-lose, right? You have one narrative, which is this evil landlord who's stomping out the common man or woman, and that's not real, right? At the end of the day, operating a property is a business. It's a hard business. You have to create a space for people to live that's safe and that they can raise a family in, and that's not easy. And then on the flip side, you have the narrative around renters where it's like, hey, there's this lazy renter that's just trying to not fulfill their obligations. And that's also nonsense, right? Most people are just trying to make it and doing the best they can with what they have, which is often too little. And so instead of sort of perpetuating this win-lose, we allowed both of these audiences to kind of have their needs met, right? We can help renters improve their financial well-being, but we can make sure landlords get paid. They get paid on time. They have more predictability in their income. And also it helps them improve their NOI, which is how they basically transact properties, buying and selling them based on property valuations. And so we really wanted to make a data-driven case to landlords to suggest not only is this the right thing to do, but it is a good thing to do for your business. And that's the only reason we've been able to scale the way that we have, because if it was just a feel-good initiative, it would not be able to get the traction that it has.
Yeah, the idea of trust is so critical. And I know you brought up in the early stages of the organization, you were going out to faith-based organizations where, people had a similar maybe philosophy and trying to get traction there. As you've grown, how do you kind of keep the story alive? Like, you are now certainly a one-to-many organization, and storytelling, certainly it was what initially made you kind of like hit my radar in a big way when I heard your story at a La Casa board meeting. But the storytelling becomes more complicated as the company gets more complex. You have more products that you're offering. How do you continue to kind of keep that origin story front and center of the way that you conduct yourselves, as well as just continuing to keep it out in the sort of public mindset?
It's a thoughtful question, Claire. I think resources and a position of power reveals who people are. And myself and Samir have just been who we are since day one, right? We had a vision. We wanted to make sure people in this country have a fighting chance and they have an opportunity to live the American dream, which have been afforded to us also. But the way practically we guide that, not only for ourselves to keep ourselves honest, but our colleagues at Esusu as the company continues to scale, is with a vision through values document. So similar to the US, there's a constitution or there's a there's a credo. We have our own credo at Esusu that talks about what is our vision statement, which is to leverage data to bridge the racial wealth gap. What is our mission statement to keep people in their homes? And then what are the values and operating principles? And above all, what are some of the things that we will never do? Like, for example, we don't believe in selling predatory products to folks, because that's not who we are. And that's enshrined in that document. And everyone that is hired at the company must review that document. It's part of their onboarding. We don't want them to just have rhetoric associated with it. We also want them to show us actions. So that's how people are rewarded, promoted, or terminated from the company. And then in addition to that, your values is not just something you paste on the wall. We also make sure every company gathering, when we have company meetings, we talk about the vision to values, however repetitive that could be, because we think it's important for people to know who we are. If you've been here for 10 years, or you've been here for 5 years, or you're just starting tomorrow, it's important to always remind ourselves who we are, what we are about, where we're going to, and what guides that process. So that's how we've kept ourselves honest. And we're human beings. We falter sometimes. We're not perfect. We're better than the worst things that we've done, like Brian Stevenson once said. And that's also a way for the company to also keep myself and Samir honest. So that's how we, as we scale, sort of keep the company going and make sure it has values and operating principles and a credo that it shouldn't ideally violate. So that's how we keep going. And in life, everything you have can be taken away from you. Everything you own can be destroyed, but provided you stick to your values, that's something the world can take away from you. And that's fundamentally who you are. So use that to keep us humble, keep us honest, and keep us on track and maniacally focused on what we're trying to accomplish.
That's a really sort of powerful portrayal of the value of culture. A lot of organizations, my background is in branding and marketing. And so, the vision, values, mission statements are things that I kind of grew up with professionally. But as my career has spanned some decades, it has become really much more meaningful. Like, what do those words really represent? And it sounds to me like your culture is something that has been very intentional, which I completely my research has certainly shown that it is something that has to be intentional. Your culture, your values, they need to be ingrained, and you can't lose sight of them because they become more watered down and just words on a document. So I find that really moving and reassuring that it has also been something that has been a bedrock for your origin, as well as how you've started to scale. In terms of culture, do you often talk about the culture within, or is it more within those values? And what sort of weight would you put behind your culture in terms of a key to your success?
Great question, Claire. You know, it's funny. It was like many years ago, there's some article or headline that came out that basically said culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I think over time, I've come to appreciate that realization more and more. Because ultimately the job of any leader, right? Whether it's a founder of a startup company, whether it's a nonprofit leader, whether it's just someone at a community church, it really doesn't matter. But it's to inspire people to be a part of something bigger than themselves, and also to have the execution and the drive to do it well, right? And that really comes down to the culture that you create as an organization. So to answer your question, we really try to put that document that Wemimo just talked about, our cultural credo that has our mission, vision, values, operating principles, and guardrails front and center. It's how we open every single all hands meeting at the company. It's how we do performance measurement and management. It's even what we open our board meetings with. And those people have heard it many times and they have other things to do with their lives, but we still make sure to keep everyone grounded in why we do what we do. So that way we can have the right context to operate and execute the business. And to be very clear, like our cultural values are not all like fluffy and feel good, right? It's really this combination of purpose and performance. If we want to bridge the racial wealth gap, if we want to keep working families in their home, if we want to create economic mobility for Americans across this country, we got to be the best of the best, right? And so it's not just like this super do good, feel good mentality, right? It's really taking that heart and combine it with the rigor and the excellence of some of the most well-run businesses. And that marriage is what I think can allow Esusu to continue to thrive, even as things change every single day in our business and our politics and our technology. If we take that mindset of doing the right thing for the world with that rigor of running a top-notch operation, we can really overcome anything that comes our way. And so that's really the needle we try to thread and why it's so front and center in everything that we do at the company.
Totally sold. So thinking about something that is quite serious, though, in terms of housing equity, like how does Esusu play a role in making housing more equitable?
Well, if we take a step back, we have a supply shortage in the United States. We're short 4 million homes to house people in the country. We live in the wealthiest nation the world has ever seen. But in places like Los Angeles, where we reside, there are tens of thousands of people living on the street. So that's just a big challenge and something that we shouldn't have in this country. So how we are contributing our own humble quota is really threefold. Number one is access to housing. If you have a poor credit score, you will pay $250,000 in interest over your lifetime, and you likely won't be afforded the opportunity to get access to housing. So making sure people, the right folks that want to get access to housing, and bigger than whatever their financial commitment looks like. So we're creating very innovative products and making sure we fairly screen people to come into housing. So that's step one, the access, the entry point. Number two, where we play most of our quintessential role, is keeping them housed. That's our mission at Esusu. And the way we do that is really simple. Now you're in housing. When you pay your rent, we make sure that data is reflected in your credit score. For low to median income people, that's 30 to 60% of their monthly expense. So that's reflected in their financial identity so they can get cheap, affordable, quality product. In addition to that, we create a marketplace of resources. So within the Esusu ecosystem, people can file taxes, people can talk to a financial coach, a real human being, just to get a perspective on what's going on in their life. We've negotiated a marketplace of quality products and services, from rental insurance to even workforce training. We just partnered with a company called Merit America that will help people that are looking for a job or looking to upskill, train them to get a minimum of a $40,000 a year job, right? So making sure people are housed is really, really important for us, and giving them all the tools and resources to make sure they don't end up on the street. And the last part is the wealth building journey. So if they elect after renting to say, I want to become a homeowner, we've prepared them to make sure they have a good credit score because we've reported all their rental data. Number two, they are more stable because of all the resources we've particularly curated and put in front of them and they've leveraged. And now when they go to a mortgage underwriter, they're ready to be on that American wealth building journey if they elect to go on that route. Home ownership is not for everyone, especially given this environment. Our hope is for folks that decide to opt in, they have the option to build wealth, and it completes our journey. How do we make sure people are seen from an identity standpoint in the entry point? How do we make sure people are stable? So we give them all the tools and services for them to be successful as a resident. And how do we give them the next ladder to ensure that they can build wealth and live the proverbial American dream? So that's how we focus on housing stability, housing access, and hopefully upward mobility in this great country.
Thank you so much for that very detailed description and answer. I'm thinking about how do you, as you're growing, and how do you continue to help those most in need? Like, I know that you probably would never not want to help someone build credit, build wealth, have a stable home life, but how are you focused? How do you, I don't know, gatekeeping is the wrong term, but you're trying to help those who most need help. And I'm sure at a certain point you reach a certain level of awareness in this space that the doors are open to all. I mean, I'm sure that they are, but I'm just curious about how do you stay focused on those who need help the most?
Claire, it's a thoughtful question, and I think, to be clear, I don't think that we're the answer for every single person, regardless of where they are in their lives, right? There's Maslow's hierarchy. Certain people are going to benefit from different products and platforms more than they might benefit from ours. So I don't want to say that we're sort of this like one-stop wonder for everything. But what we try to do, right, is take a step back, put ourselves in the shoes of people in this country, many of those experiences that myself and Wemimo have had, but maybe don't have today, right? And really think about how we can build a platform that works for everyone. And so, number one, it's really about being intentional and evolving our product so that we can meet more people where they're at. To give you an example, we started out selling to large landlords. Many of those landlords are institutional landlords, right? So they are scaled. They have 5,000, 10,000, 100,000 units. And sure, we work with public housing authorities and nonprofits, but a lot of Americans live in mom and pop housing. So how do we reach those people? Well, let's create a direct-to-consumer option so that we're not reliant on the landlord, right, to essentially reach people who need our services. And actually, we still want to try to reach people at scale. So what if we take that offering and embed it into other financial service applications? So now we can plug into a banking application or a new fintech like a Chime, not saying that that's an actual one, but as an illustrative example. And a consumer can basically build credit by paying rent powered by Esusu wherever they do their banking, right? Or wherever they do their financial services work, right? Or maybe we can start to package it as something that we sell as an employee or employer benefit. So now we can work through employers to reach people at scale, right? And that allows us to kind of continue to reach segments of the market we might be missing today. I would say that our bread and butter as a company is really in that sort of like low to moderate income, not extremely low where it's like almost 100% Section 8 housing, even though we do serve that audience. And it's not obviously an affluent audience where they have optionality, right? But that sort of missing middle that we love to talk about in this country is really where we can have the most profound impact, right? But we still serve the entire spectrum. And we want to make sure that no matter who you are, where you are, we have a solution or a product that can meet your needs where you are in that moment. And actually, our hope is that our audiences stop needing our products, right? And that we grow with them and we graduate them from this sort of baseline. Now I have a credit identity. Okay, now I have $400 in my bank account. Now I've read, 100 pages of financial literacy. Ideally, we move from that into something where people now start to be able to think more aspirationally. Life insurance, right? Saving more, saving for college education for their kids, right? Maybe buying a home, starting a small business, getting a car, right? How do we help people move from sort of baseline stuff into aspirational things? So my hope is that we meet people where they are, and then the products that we started out with become less and less relevant, and we can kind of work with them as they grow, but still meet the next set of people who are in that more vulnerable position where they are, right? The last thing I'll add before I end my soliloquy here is really not everything needs to be a for-profit solution. So we've also, myself and Wemimo are very committed to homelessness prevention. And so, a few years back, we helped set up an organization called Stable Home Fund that offers 0% interest loans to people who are experiencing a short-term financial emergency. We as a for-profit company cannot just give out, venture capital funds to people, but there needs to be a vehicle that understands that sometimes life happens. And how do we give people that lifeline so that they can get back on their feet, get back on track, and not have this sort of one-time emergency be a life-altering event? And that is something that we set up as a 501c3 that now is being emulated on the public policy front and in other places. And so, we really try to be conscious of like where we can provide the right solution to meet people where they are.
Well, first of all, you sound like you should both be amazing parents, because I really feel like the way that you described the support and moving people from sort of their initial needs to building wealth to maybe not needing you at all, it really did remind me of what, I hope for my children, and I hope for adults across this globe. So thank you. I know we're about up on time, but I'm curious, you talked about profound impact, and your stories are certainly profound, but I'm curious if there's a story of someone that you've helped, I don't know, that you could share something that would just sort of leave us with a nice kind of end cap to this conversation.
Yeah, happy to share a gentleman called Steve. Right at the depth of the pandemic, there was a gentleman that we were working with that has been working all his life, and he got laid off because of COVID-19, and was at the point of being potentially evicted from his apartment unit. And he reached out to us because he heard us. We're talking about the services we offer. We had an eviction prevention initiative where we wanted to make sure people stayed in their homes, but the owner of the properties can also get paid rent, and people have to go through an application. So he reached out to us. We proactively provided our services to them and paid their landlord directly the cost of their rent. And we didn't hear from him for a while, and then we reached out to just follow up on what happened. And it was such an emotional conversation because he was just so grateful for us to, help him avoid being homeless or houseless, being on the street. Number two, we actually got a really remarkable story from him because he got back on his feet, got a job that was paying more than his previous job, and have the opportunity to stay in his home. And that was just such a very, very moving story. And the landlord that he was residing with was also happy because they had the opportunity to also keep this renter. So he created a win-win-win. So a win for him, a win for the landlord, and hopefully a win for society, because we're not spending taxpayers' dollars solving homelessness or houselessness backwards. So that story always sort of resonates with us on this concept that people don't want a handout. People just want a fighting chance. People have dignity, and we want to make sure we see them for who they are. Life happens to each and every one of us, and no one is immune from shocks, but we need to create the infrastructure that when people falter, we're there to provide that lifeline for them. I think it's often the case that folks are quick to say people want a handout, but that's not true. And we need to see the dignity, we need to see the humanity, and ultimately we need to give people a fighting chance. And when we're able to do that, we believe that is what made this great country what it is, and that's the true genius of America. So that's what we want to focus our energy on. It's for folks like Scott, it's for folks like Steve, it's for folks like Tamisha that we've worked with. So many people across the Esusu platform, millions of people at this point, is to make sure it's clear to the world that when things get tough, we will be here to support, but we will see people for who they are and give them a fighting chance.
Well, I appreciate this perspective and the collective nature of the mission ahead, which is really like it is not left up to any one individual. We all really do play a role. And I appreciate you both giving us some space here today to share your thoughts, your visions about this landscape and how we can all do our part to make a difference. And I look forward to continuing to stay in touch with you all. And thank you so much for being part of the Idea People.
Thanks so much for having us, Claire. Really appreciate the thoughtful questions and look forward to staying connected.
Likewise.
Thanks a lot. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.